All right, well, I think this is probably our crew. So unless anybody has reason to wait, we'll get rolling. Before we start, I want to kind of acknowledge where we are. Right now, everything's kind of upside down. This book club was initially supposed to happen before COVID happened. It, of course, got pushed back. That changed things for an awful lot of people. And then Katie and I sat down and came up with some discussion questions, and a lot of them really, I think all of them really do talk about COVID and how that's impacting running and how it relates to everything that we read about in this book. And then everything changed again. And, conversations don't always put themselves into little boxes where we stay on topic and everything. And I get that things overlap, and if the civil unrest and protest and all of the racial injustices kind of like flow over into this, then like that's where we're at, and I get it. The other thing I want to mention is that the store does intend to post this to our YouTube page for folks who were unable to join or are just interested in the topic, but didn't know about us just yet. If anybody's uncomfortable with that for any reason, just send Jared an email and he will not post that to Facebook or to YouTube. His email address is his first name, Jared, J-E-R-E-D, @movinshoes.com. And those are really my housekeeping notes. So if it's okay with you, we'll just do some introductions and then I'll hand things off to get going on discussion. I'm Amber. And then, I was going to say maybe we should just talk maybe briefly about how long you've been running and kind of how, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how impacted are you feeling? 1, like everything's fine, and 10, nothing's been this crazy before and I don't even know what to do anymore. So I'm Amber. I've been running since 1994. I work at Movin Shoes, and that's kind of why we're all here under this Movin Shoes banner. I'd say right now I'm probably feeling impacted like maybe a 7, give or take. How about Nina, as you're drinking?
Thank you. I'm Nina, and I've been running a long time, but more recently, I think since 2008 or 2009, I've gotten into half marathons, and that's really given me a whole new motivation, ambition. It's just dialed it up a notch, but it's been a fun notch to have it dialed up. And I too work at Movin Shoes, thanks to Amber. After I retired, I started working there part-time, and I really enjoy it. And this whole thing, given that like none of us are old enough to have lived through the 1917 Spanish flu, I don't think any of us have ever experienced anything like this. So it's really kind of crazy, and I'm really grateful that I can run, because that is my sanity. That is my happy place. That is my go-to place. I'm so grateful I'm not injured so that I can run. And the thing that's been hard is not having any races. And the one race I ran was a virtual, which is like this big nothing burger. And I mean, it was still, it was hard. It's just not the same. So it's just, this is an odd time, but having and so grateful that I can run.
You're on Facebook. Well, hey, log in through Facebook.
Hey, I see that there's a Sarah here, but Sarah, we can't see you, but if you want to say hello, that'd be great.
Hi, this is Sarah, and I sometimes appear in the summer. So I was actually planning to come back right before COVID started, because I was like feeling good and everything, but didn't make it. So, and I've been running like maybe the last 2 years on and off. So.
Okay.
That's good. And how's it impacting me? We
Yeah.
have good days and we have bad days at the house. So
Yeah.
we have, that's about it.
Morgan?
All right. Well, the whole COVID situation has honestly been pretty good for, can you hear me? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. The whole COVID situation has honestly been not good, but I have so much time now. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never had time to train like this ever. So, I mean, just being able to recover the way that I've never been able to, because I always have things to do, all of that's been really nice. But, the last couple weeks with the protests and strained conversations with family,
Yeah.
it's not ideal. And I think that's probably put my anxiety roller coaster going. But having the time to run it out has definitely been very nice. And I mean, I ran cross country in high school, but I really only did that to hang out with friends. So I've really only been running for a few years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Katie?
Hey, I'm Katie, and I've been running off and on for about 10 years, but really only started to get into half marathons and stuff a couple years ago. And in terms of the pandemic and everything, it's been probably, with, like Amber said, about a 7. I'm a teacher, school librarian, so adjusting to virtual and online teaching has been an adventure. Tomorrow is our last day. So hopefully everything kind of goes smoothly. But yeah, otherwise just that has definitely been a little stressful. But yeah, otherwise, I come up with the discussion questions for this group. I am a librarian, so you can blame me if they're not great. But yeah.
Okay, well, there's one left.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to your group. I'm Larry. So I've been running for close to 40 years, I guess. I started in college, and most of my running until I moved to Wisconsin was all on the East Coast and Philadelphia area where I grew up. And I'm definitely running less now than I used to. I used to be always training for the Sitnamai or a marathon or something like that. And I'm just getting kind of old and can't do those distances any longer. But running is still a central part of my life. And I still identify as someone who runs. And I still connect with running buddies who are older than I am and have given up running, but we still think of ourselves as runners, even if we don't run. So it's been a big part of my life, and I can't imagine a time in my life where I wouldn't value running. I'm doing a lot more biking than I used to do. It's easier on my joints, and I have more time now in the day to do biking. I think every hour of running translates into about 2.5 hours of biking. It takes longer to get the kind of workout biking that you do running, and running is just sort of the perfect form of exercise, right? All you need is a pair of sneakers and an hour, and you've got a great workout. I've of course been hugely affected by both the pandemic and by the Black Lives Matter movement. These things have been both terrible and also, I think, sources for hope and inspiration as well. The pandemic has, of course, been financially and economically terrible for a lot of people, but it's also brought on challenges and exposed things about this country that needed to be exposed. And I think the country will be stronger for it in a couple of years. And I think the same can be said of the Black Lives Matter movement. we all knew that there was racism. It didn't come as the kind of surprise that COVID did, which sort of just came out of nowhere, but we all knew it was impossible to deny that there was racism in this country. And with George Floyd's murder, I've said this after Eric Garner too, but with George Floyd's murder, I really hope that we'll see positive change. So I've been looking on the pandemic as something that's teaching me things about myself that I didn't know before, and something that's been presenting me with challenges that I never thought I'd have to encounter. Things as kind of trivial as having to learning how to teach my courses online, to more significant. How do I visit my mother who's dying, knowing that I could kill her if I transmit this disease to her by flying down to see her, and knowing that I may not see her if I don't travel down to see her. So challenges like that are significant. And the Black Lives Matter movement, again, it's a source of great pain to see what African Americans are having to deal with on a daily basis. But it's also inspirational to see how the youth in this country are coming alive in a way that I haven't seen them come alive before. I think for a long time, the youth in this country have been sort of painted as privileged and as lazy, or as not as involved politically as they should be. And I think there's good reason to think all of that was wrong. And I'm really hopeful about the kinds of changes that the youth are going to bring to this country. So that's where I'm sitting on all of this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm really glad that you were able to make some time to share your book with us and come hang out on a Monday evening.
We all have a lot of time on our hands now, don't we?
Yeah. You want to take it away, Katie?
Sure. So I shared the link to the Google Doc in the chat if you'd like to have it up in front of you. But our first question, and thank you to Amber, because I think she put a lot of the page numbers and stuff in here, is to start, how are you feeling about running right now? Has the pandemic made you more or less inclined to run? And what are you doing to cope with uncertainty? So I guess I can start. I think I'm running a little bit more consistently now. Part of that was just starting like a new training routine, I think in the spring. And then like Morgan said, just having a little bit more time. Running is also a good way to get out of the house. My husband is also a teacher and is also home all the time. So it's good occasionally to get out a little bit. But yeah, so I think I've been running about the same amount. For me, it was really hard at the beginning of the pandemic because I live kind of downtown. And so I would run, and I'm very, especially because I would usually run after work, like was very used to seeing lots of cars and people out. And you just see these like post-apocalyptic looking streets. And it was very like weirdly difficult for me. Now, I think probably just there's more people out and about in general. But yeah, at the beginning it was a little more difficult, and I think now it's kind of normalized more for me. So.
I live downtown too, so I know what you're talking about. It really does feel like, something from a bad sci-fi movie sometimes around here. Yeah. Are you running with people? Do you feel comfortable running with people?
Generally, I just run by myself. I don't really tend to run with people outside of like this running group. So yeah, I've just kind of been running by myself. So that's probably added a little bit to the weirdness.
Do you wear a mask when you run?
I did at the beginning. Now that our school has kind of worked out, I've been able to go a lot earlier in the morning, so I don't worry as much about running into people. But yeah, at the beginning I did just because I would worry a lot about like I live right by one of the hospitals, so there's kind of always people, at least right on my immediate block, coming and going, so. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt my advantages was that I'm not right downtown,
Yeah.
and I live on a like relatively main residential road, so there's always runners and cyclists going by, but it's nowhere near as dense as it would be if I were downtown, or even just looking at pictures of New York City where people are out trying to run in Central Park and it's just bodies. You know, I can easily run and maybe see a couple people, if any. So that's been really fortunate for me, to just not have to worry about that. But I always feel like I'm not running so much. But then today I went downstairs to sort laundry at the bottom of the laundry chute, and my dirty laundry tells a very different story. Like, somebody's wearing my running clothes. And so it's most likely me. But I feel like my running patterns have really changed. Like how far I'm running. I'm kind of on like an every other day schedule now, as opposed to like 3 days on, a day off, a couple more days on, a day off. So I'm just kind of running. I feel like I'm running less miles and a little bit less days, but I'm still definitely going.
Have you noticed any change in the behavior of other runners? I've noticed some. I've noticed that there's a real division, an age division, when I'm approaching someone as a runner. When I'm approaching someone or someone is approaching me, I'll notice that younger people are much more cavalier about keeping a social distance from me,
Right,
whereas
yeah.
older people are much more careful about ensuring that there's 6 feet between them and me. Has anyone else noticed this kind of thing?
It's interesting that you mentioned if I've noticed the difference in behaviors in runners, because immediately I was thinking, you know, I've got this big bay window and I see at this point more runners going past my window than I ever have before when I've lived here. And I think it's like just individuals out for a run, but what also appears to be like mom and dad and kids out for a run that I've never seen before. But I run into so few people when I'm running in my neighborhood that most people just kind of step aside, but I run into so few people, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Nina? Oh, sorry, Morgan.
Oh, you're fine. I'm also downtown, so I'm on the bike trails all the time, and I'm training for the half Ironman that got pushed to September. And especially when the weather started getting nice, the bike trails were super packed, like more packed than I think I've ever seen them. So it's been, I mean, you can't avoid it if you're gonna go out running not at 5 a.m. But yeah, I've definitely noticed older people that are out walking or running will like stop and like turn away from you. I've seen that quite a few times. Kind of makes me surprised that they're out there if they're that concerned. Because it gets really crowded. Like during the weekdays, I definitely run at 5 a.m. just to like keep my distance, but during the weekends, it's not avoidable. But I try to pass as much distance as I can, but I mean, sometimes it's just not much you can do about it.
And I also live downtown, actually right across the street from one of the bike paths. So it's amazing how many people are out and about, which is totally understandable given that nothing is open, right? All the gym rats don't have any place to go. So it's like you take it outside or you're not going to work out at all. I do not wear a mask when I run. I just can't fathom wearing a mask and running. Just wearing a mask in general feels really claustrophobic. I mean, I wear one when I need to wear one and I abide by that, but I just can't. I have not been able to do that. So I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying that. I'm not able to run with a mask. I also bike ride and I don't ride with a mask then either. But I really am respectful of space and of giving that space, and I'll jump into the street if I see that somebody is just not, giving me room. I will just, jump on right into the parking lane or whatever to make that room. A lot of the bike paths allow you for that 6 feet, but some of the bike paths, like Morgan, I think you were saying, can get really crowded. They really can. And so I just try and avoid the places that are crowded. One thing that's really helped, and maybe some of you other downtowners have noticed, that the Arboretum, that they closed the Arboretum on the Mill Street side to cars, which is super nice, because then you've got the whole road for people to spread out, for there to be the bikes and the runners, and that's been like a luxury to have that. So I agree that I think some of the younger people are definitely more cavalier about distance and wearing masks and all of that, and most of the older runners, for the most part, tend to be a little bit more socially distance conscious. But there are definitely a lot more people out, that's for sure.
I wonder how many people will get into the habit of walking or running or biking, having never really done it before, and stick with it once it's safe to return to your normal lifestyle.
It'll be interesting.
I wonder that too, because it seems like when the first started the whole pandemic, it just seems like we live really close to the Arboretum. It just seemed like an explosion of people just out. And I'm like, I've like never even seen these people in our neighborhood step outside their house once, it seems. So it was interesting to see that. And since then it's really tapered off. So that's been interesting. I agree with you. I like that the Arbor is open. I wish that they were proactive and did it much earlier, because it was, the time we went in there before that happened, it seems like it was just so crowded and busy with cars, and
Right.
we actually just even stopped going in there because it was so busy. I don't wear a mask, but I find that we're really good. I usually go running with one of my daughters who are also runners, who are a good inspiration because they moved back home and they're running. So I've joined them too, and they've been really patient with me. But we're like really good of like crossing the street, of going to the other side when we feel that, that someone else isn't going to move. So that's been good.
I don't wear a mask either. I think if I keep my distance from people, the chance of me infecting them or becoming infected by them is so small outdoors. And I can barely wear a mask when I'm in a grocery store. I find it's just so claustrophobic.
Thankfully, a lot of studies are coming out saying it's unless you're talking face to face, it's the chances of getting someone else sick or getting sick yourself while you're just outside is low. It's just the exposure. So, I mean, we should definitely try and keep our distance, but not be crippled by the fear of it.
That's what I thought too, yeah.
That goes kind of nicely into our next question, which is talking about in the first chapter, Larry, you addressed some of the common obstacles to running. Are there obstacles that you're experiencing right now? How are you addressing them? And do you feel okay letting some obstacles change things?
That's a good question. Well, certainly the pandemic did bring new obstacles, right? We were just talking about them. We have to be very mindful of other people as we run now in a way that we didn't. I find myself looking sort of far down the street to see who's on the sidewalk coming my way, and I start thinking ahead of time, how should I evade this person in ways that I normally didn't have to think about it at all. I also think that the times of day that I normally run, and this gets to the point that many of you have already made, may no longer be the times of day that I feel comfortable running because the crowds are too thick or the routes are too crowded. So these are all obstacles that are just a couple months old, a couple weeks old, that didn't exist beforehand.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of it is changing very rapidly. When people first went into shutdowns, I think that I was more hesitant to be out running because we really didn't know, like, is running the opposite direction across the street from somebody a death sentence to me or no big deal? Does anyone know? No. Okay, great. Well, we'll just figure something out. And, you know, as we've seen a little bit more research and evidence that running the opposite direction across the street from someone is probably just fine. You know, I feel like that's sort of changed some obstacles around for me. And that's also just another obstacle, is because the thing that I think was okay yesterday, like maybe today it's not, or vice versa. And that unknown of what's happening, what's not happening has been, I think, its own obstacle to me in a way.
I've also noticed biking has been a lot easier this year because when you're out on the country roads, inevitably some pickup truck will come bearing down on you honking. It's always a pickup truck. I don't know why, but the roads are empty now. It's as if the bicyclists own the roads, and when you bike down south to Paoli or Basco or places like this, there's no longer any kind of concern that you're going to be nudged off the road by a bunch of traffic.
And Katie, you spoke about that when you said the first part of when things first shut down and how that just felt really weird to you. I have found it just wonderful. It is so great, especially living downtown.
Yeah.
And not being this constant traffic has just been, it's just been great. And I think it's going to be really, I hope I haven't gotten too used to it, because obviously at some point more people are going to be returning to work and there's going to be more traffic. I mean, it's just inevitable, but I have been loving that there is like no traffic. It's just been great.
Being able to shut your brain off is just wonderful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like not having as many obligations that you have to race home for. It's just, it's more relaxing in some ways.
Are all of you working from home now? Do any of you go into, well, I guess, Amber, you go into Movin Shoes, is that right? And Katie?
Right now, I'm not taking any hours at the shoe store. We are at limited capacity. Things are not how they normally are. And for my situation, I feel like it's better for me to not be accepting hours right now. So I'm just really not working, which opens up ridiculous amounts of time for me. Like too much time. Like I don't know what day it is most of the days. I'm glad I'm not alone, Sarah.
But then I conversely have been taking hours at Movin Shoes. I was reluctant at first, but it's a good setup with us having customers by appointment only, because then we can control how many people come into the store, and things are very structured to provide that 6 feet of separation with the customer. We require them to wear masks. We wear masks. It's this whole new world where like your hand sanitizer everywhere and you sanitize everything, and it's that added level, that those extra steps that you have to take that everybody's taking now. I get that, but I'm happy to have that interaction, albeit it's not that many days that I work, but it's really actually quite nice to be back in that environment and to be interacting with people other than just my husband, who is a great guy, but it's just nice to be around other people. So I've actually been enjoying it.
Do any of you have younger children at home, school-age children?
We have a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old, so
Yeah,
not totally
that's-
younger, but now that school is done, it's kind of like they're looking at, what's next, because there's one has a summer job now, but the other one's like, what am I supposed to be doing? So yeah.
Summer job, that's surprising.
Yeah, she was able to get a summer job. So
Sarah, did they come home early because school went online?
they did, yeah. Our 16-year-old was actually gone at a semester school, so we went to get her, and our 19-year-old was at UW-Madison, and she came home too. So it was interesting because neither of them actually wanted to come home, obviously. So it was not very happy campers at home for a while. So we all had to readjust and learn how to live with one another.
My younger daughter is a first grade teacher, and so she had to go online, and she felt like she was doing a lot of babysitting. Parents were just pushing their kids in front of the computer, and it was hard for her because she was teaching not just the children, but the parents were there listening to her teach the children, which she's a first-year teacher. This is her first year, and she was already nervous to begin with. And the thought that parents would be judging her in addition to having to deal with the kids was really a lot for her.
I think teaching, like you were saying, Larry, teaching classes online has been a transition for everyone, at whatever level, college or high school, grade school. I think it's been a transition for everyone. And then likewise for the students having to learn online. And you're hearing students saying, like, this isn't what especially college students saying, this isn't what I signed up for. I'm not paying all this money for online classes. I'm essentially, a lot of them are saying, like, I came here for the on-campus experience, for the college experience, and they're not getting it. And I think that's got to be really challenging.
Yeah, I feel terrible for these kids, the ones who, spent 4 years at UW looking forward to a graduation ceremony, looking forward to spending their last month or two on the terrace hanging out. And the university is doing everything it can to open its doors because there's a lot of money at stake now.
Right.
It'll be an interesting year.
So kind of, it's interesting because I feel like our conversation, and I think this has been like a common theme in people that I've talked to about the pandemic, is like, there's just so much that's outside of your control, whether it's like, I think something I really struggled with in the beginning is, this idea that you can be as isolated as possible, but you eventually have to go to the grocery store or something, and that you would pick up something there, things like that. And kind of so like what you can control versus just kind of the uncontrollable stuff. And our third question was about, so it's from page 35 in the book. Zen is all about understanding and controlling one's attitudes, whether about running or other things. We have been in this pandemic mode for a couple months now. Has your attitude toward running, training, and managing life shifted much as we navigate new ways of being?
I reread my book today. I hadn't read it in a number of years.
I was wondering if you were going to have to go back and reread it.
Some of it is pretty dated, right? I talk about telephones. I talk about MP3 players. I wrote the book 12 years ago. The world has changed so much in 12 years.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the pandemic and about the Black Lives Matter movement in light of the kinds of things I'm saying in the book. And it struck me how how different the lessons to take away from thinking about Zen Buddhism are when you apply them to the pandemic versus when you apply them to the BLM movement. With the pandemic, we genuinely have something over which we have hardly any control. We can't really affect the course this disease takes. We'll hopefully in time develop a vaccine, and that will prevent the disease from spreading further. But it's the kind of thing where we have to adjust our lives to it. It's not going to change simply because we want it to change. And this is where I think Zen really can teach us something, because it is about controlling your attitudes. It's about how you decide to perceive these challenges that are being put before you. You can see them as terrible things that will ruin your life, or you can see them as opportunities to discover new things about yourself, or about the kinds of the features in your life that now take on a different kind of value. And it's hard, but that's how I've been trying to deal with it. I think about how this is changing my relationship with my wife. I've always had a very good relationship with her, and I think it's even stronger now. We spend probably 24 hours a day within 10 feet of each other. And it's been challenging, but it's also been really rewarding. And talking on FaceTime, connecting with people I haven't talked to for years just because I'm concerned about them. That's I think really a silver lining to all of this. But then when you think about the Black Lives Matter movement, what Zen philosophy does is it teaches you how to make the best of things you can't change. But with Black Lives Matter, we have the opposite situation, because we can change how we think about African American rates of poverty and African American persecution by law enforcement. These are all things that are under our control, and we shouldn't be trying to adopt a positive attitude toward these terrible things that are happening to this minority group. Instead, we should be actively trying to change what we can to improve their situation. Those are the thoughts that were going through my head as I read my book today. Do any of you have any of you been involved in the protests?
No, I haven't.
My husband and I went to the sit-in on John Nolan for a couple hours.
Oh,
Heard some of the speakers there. I mean, that was like a 5-minute walk from our place. So
yeah.
And because we're both working, so we can't make any of the noon, protests. But that was really nice to go see, and obviously watching all the artists on State Street a few days ago was really beautiful.
I walked down State Street yesterday. It really is something. It reminded me of I don't know how many of you were in Madison during the Act 10 protests, when you had 100,000 people surrounding the Capitol building, and all the signs and all the paintings and all the murals, and just this simultaneous anger over the sorts of policies that Walker was trying to implement, but this also kind of great feeling of unity and hopefulness, which in the end didn't amount to anything really, other than an opportunity to let people know how unhappy a number of people in the state were. But I really hope that good does come of the kinds of protesting that we've seen, in addition to the the harder to accept aspects involving the looting. I heard Movin' Shoes was looted. Is that right?
Yeah, it was broken into. One of the, I think, probably one of the considered a fringe business, like some random places on the east and the west sides were broken into. It's kind of odd in a way, but maybe not. I don't know. It's no other storefront on South Park Street was broken into, but there aren't a lot of storefronts. There's more restaurants. There wasn't a lot taken. The front door was smashed and it's a glass door. So then that meant that glass shards just went everywhere. And the wall right inside the front door that was running socks, they were just covered in little glass shards. So, those have to be discarded. Can't do anything with them. I was kind of surprised at how much it upset me when I found out, because the running community is really near and dear to me, and it's not a big box store. It's not like, it's not like some big corporation. It's not Target. It's not Amazon. It's like, this is a family owned business. It's always been independently owned. I mean, Amber has a longer history with the store than I do. It's always been my store. It's in my neighborhood. It means something to me. So it felt personal, but then, it got complicated because on the other hand, it's like, no, I'm not valuing property. This is not about me valuing property over George Floyd. This is not, I'm not making a value statement here, but it was upsetting to me. And it felt like a real violation. Like, we're not the bad guys. We're a small store. We're giving shoes to the kids at Lincoln Elementary School. We're giving shoes to them. We're supporting their recess club so these kids who can't buy running shoes will have running shoes. So that was really hard to have the store broken into. That was really hard. And now to see it is like, and because of where we're located, no artists have come to paint on the boarded up door. And then the owners were concerned because the front is almost all those glass windows in the front, and then that made them nervous. So they put plywood up on the inside of most of those windows. So it's a totally different feel. They took all the shoes down, and so it feels really different. And so that's a reminder, when I go to work, it's a reminder that it was vandalized, and that just makes me kind of sad. I mean, I'm sad. Again, I'm sad for some of the property owners on State Street they've been decimated. And again, I'm not valuing property over Black lives. I just think it's just sad because, again, none of them are bad people. And they just got in the crosshairs of the turmoil. And so I think that's really sad.
I wonder for how long the boards will remain up, given that the protests now seem to have entered a more sort of peaceful phase.
That's a really good question. That is a really good question. Like, I shop at Community Pharmacy. That's the pharmacy I go to, and they boarded up their whole front proactively.
I guess pharmacies have to be, they know there'll be targets, right?
Yeah. But everything's boarded up. You know that. You just went down. Everything's boarded up.
Yeah. Overture Center is boarded up.
Everything, yeah. It's so surreal. It's it's very surreal. And so it makes me hope that change will come from this. Like that, there's been a lot of pain, I think people are really, I mean, African Americans have been hurting for a super long time. I can't pretend to know what that's like historically. It's just, change is really long overdue. So I really hope that change can come from this.
My older daughter lives in New Orleans, which was just hit so hard by the COVID. The African American community there was just torn down because of Mardi Gras, because of the prominence of church going, the African American communities, and then on top of that, this hit. And she's been going to some of the protests and participating in movements like that, but it's just the impact that the two events, one coming on top of the other, has had. It's around the world too, right? I have friends in Australia who tell me about the protests going on in there, and I have a colleague from London who's telling me about the protests going there. It's remarkable how international it's become. I don't know if looting has been as prevalent internationally as it has in this country.
I haven't heard that it has been. But we are sneaking up on about an hour. We have this space for 2 hours, which we actually chatted about a little while ago. It's funny how time kind of slips away.
Yeah, it does.
But I did have, there is like one question on here, I don't remember which number it is, that I actually wanted to see if you would expound on a little bit more.
If I can, sure.
That's the idea of like meditative running, or like running while meditating. And meditating's always been really hard for me. I think a lot of Zen teachers talk about a tree full of monkeys and they're just like all climbing around, and like you can't get them to sit still. And that's often an analogy towards a person's mind. And that is mine. That's very much my reality. And running does help take that noise and all of that. Like you use the analogy of, you know, blackboard with so many things written on it that like you can't even look at one. And running just kind of clears a few things off of there and allows me to focus on like, what's my breathing doing? Are there cars? Is this like a pothole? But meditative running has just been a challenge for me, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
I'm not great at meditation. I can do it. I sometimes wonder at
Comforting to hear.
Yeah, no, I'm really curious about people who claim to be able to spend an hour without thinking about anything. I find that really hard. When I meditate, I do it first thing in the morning, sort of before the day gets going, and I start thinking about everything that I have to accomplish or that I want to accomplish but know that I won't accomplish. So I find that here's one insight I have. I don't know whether it'll help or not, but the worst thing you can do when you're trying to meditate is start getting concerned that you're not doing it right. When you start feeling that there's too much going on in your mind, you'll never be able to meditate. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You'll never be able to clear your mind once you start worrying about clearing your mind. So you have to approach it with this attitude that you'll do your best, and maybe you'll not be able to clear your mind of everything that's making you anxious. But I find it's helpful to take that open attitude where success is not guaranteed. Meditation is something that takes a lot of practice, just like you're not going to get up one morning and run a marathon without training. And when you start getting thoughts filtering through your mind, flitting through your mind, just think about that thought without really thinking. take, so maybe you're wondering what you should cook for dinner tonight. This is something that always strikes me early in the day. It's my job to do all the cooking, and I get tired of eating the same things all the time. So it's like a challenge that I have to overcome every day. What am I cooking tonight? So instead of getting involved in this thought, what will I be cooking tonight? I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook tonight. And then you just sort of put that aside. You've sort of attached a label to it. You've recognized that it's something that is potentially making you anxious. And you just sort of decide, I'll come back to that later. I don't want to think about that now. It's there, but I'm going to come back to it. Not now. Now is my time not to think about things that are going to make me anxious. And I find that that strategy works just as well when you're actually running. And in running, I think actually it's kind of a better opportunity for meditating than simply sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor, because you're already kind of distracted by the mechanics of running. You're having to think about where to put your feet, what to avoid, how to pace yourself as the hill approaches. And all these sorts of thoughts take you away. They take me away from the kinds of mundane concerns or looming anxieties that everyone encounters every day. And so I find myself able to just sort of concentrate, focus on my pace, my feet hitting the ground. And when I'm thinking about my feet hitting the ground repetitively, I find it pretty easy to let go of the other sorts of thoughts that cloud my mind otherwise. I don't know, does anyone else have that experience running where they're able to just put aside most of their concerns and focus instead on just moving through the air?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely am able to put aside a lot of the just sort of everyday little worries, like you said. What are we doing about dinner? And oh man, I was supposed to put that registration sticker on my license plate, and
Thanks for
I
reminding me.
I know, because I need to do that.
Yeah, I do too.
Right, like all those little things that like just crop up, but it's also the point of like, well, I'm 3 miles away from home, so there's nothing I can do about the registration sticker that is sitting on my dining room table instead of being attached to my license plate. So I'm just gonna keep running because there's nothing to do about that. But I think one of the things that's been hard for me about trying meditative running is I'm always, like you said, thinking about what are my feet doing? What are my arms doing? Is there a car? How fast am I going? How slow am I going? What am I going to do about this hill? And I guess if that's part of the process of meditative running, because I'm not thinking about those things on my cushion, right, sitting there meditating on the floor. I feel like maybe I'm doing a better job of it than I thought.
Yeah, I think the purpose of meditating is to relax your mind. And the kinds of concerns that you're just describing that become sort of central when you're running they're not big issues, right?
Yeah.
If the worst thoughts going through your head at any point are, should I slow down because I'm going up a hill, then you're doing pretty well. But I also do think that there's a point when you're running and your body is just clicking and doing what it needs to do to move you forward. It's easy to kind of forget that you're running. And then you can just sort of think about the breeze on your face. You can think about the way the light is dappling on the sidewalk in front of you. And I just find those moments really kind of relaxing and rejuvenating in a certain way.
Yeah, thanks for expanding on that. That was helpful for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe I'll let the five of you catch up now, and I'll start thinking about what I'm going to cook my wife for dinner. Now that I know that so many of you live downtown, I'll probably be seeing you all the time.
I would think, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for making the time to join us, especially with all the craziness that's going on.
It was really nice
Yeah.
to talk to you, and it was fun to go back and read my book and think about what I was going through my head 12 years ago.
So I think we got through maybe 3 or 4 of our dozen questions.
Yeah.
But I think it's always good in a situation like this to have more questions maybe than we need. But I guess before we close, I'm wondering if anybody has anything that they really felt like they wanted to talk through, or anything you feel like we missed that you want to go over. Now is the time to
Yeah,
say stuff.
sure.
Well, I'm probably the only person in this group who can say that I really appreciated your input about, well, how did you put it, Zen and aging.
Yeah, that chapter means more to me now than it did 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm an aging runner, so, and trust me, all of you are aging too, but you're not, and I'm more advanced in the process than you are. So there will come a time when you'll be approaching these thoughts too, where it's like, looking at what am I capable of, being accepting, rather than wanting to be able to run as fast as I did 5 years ago. All of that stuff. I felt that you really, thank you for addressing that and speaking to that, because I think not every runner is competitive, but you've got some competitiveness in you if you've raced Ironman and done marathons, and so there is a certain level of acceptance that I think is challenging. It's at least it's challenging for me, and so I really appreciated your input on that, and I'll probably need to reread those pages on occasion about accepting myself and my abilities as I continue to age.
I'm glad you found it useful. I've met a lot of older runners who are just so hard on themselves because they can no longer run that 7:30 mile that they'd been running for 10 years. And the thought that they're running 8:30 miles now is just, they can't accept it. And they're constantly trying to reduce their time, and it's not going to work. They're not going to get younger.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and Nina, I appreciate that you said you feel like maybe it's something you're going to revisit again, at various points. I think that I read this book initially, like shortly after it was published, and then put it away for a while, and then picked it up again for group, and then read it for group, and then read it again and again because it kept getting put back. Well, the last couple of times have really just been like scans, but I feel like it's a good book to have around. It's really unique in that it's just a little book, but you can really bring depth to it as a reader, or not, right? You can just flip through it, and I feel like you address things like the aging runner, like Nina brought up, that we don't find in a lot of other running related publications.
I'm so happy to hear that it's been of some use to you.
And also addressing being injured, because I don't know any runner who hasn't had an injury, and I think runners can also be really hard on themselves with injuries, and so that was also very insightful. So thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I've kind of felt like this whole COVID situation has been like being injured in some way, right? Because all of our races are gone, which is what
Right.
happens when you're injured. usually when you're injured, you don't know, is this going to last another week? Is this going to last a year? Is this going to just be a forever thing? Like, I'm never going to run again.
Mhm.
Like, there's so many unknowns when you've got an injury, and I've kind of been feeling like running through this is like recovering from an injury. Like, I'm just going to go for a run and I don't know, we'll see what happens, right? And so I feel like that chapter was really applicable to a global pandemic in a very weird way.
I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but you're right.
That's a good point.
Yeah, does anybody else have points of our other dozen questions that we didn't get to that we want to hit before we say goodbye for the evening?
I might just, while everybody's still here, plug our next book.
Thank you,
Oh,
Katie.
good.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm not sure, Amber, if you and Jared have come up with a time to meet. I know maybe we were thinking like early August, potentially.
Yeah, I think that we came up with a date, and I think that it's not in my head right now. So there is a date, and it is in the future,
Yeah.
and it is on a Monday.
Excellent. All right. So we're actually going to kind of switch things up for our next book and read, and Amber had suggested this a while back, and I thought it was a really great suggestion. Let me just pull up my details so I make sure I get it right. So we're going to read Carl Harder's book, who's was the founder of Movin Shoes, is that correct?
No, Carl owned Movin Shoes
Yeah.
for several years. He's not the original owner, but he's definitely one of the originals and owned it for decades.
Yeah. So, and he unfortunately passed away earlier this year. And so we wanted to read his book, more just to learn more about him. And so his book is actually a true crime novel. It's called Winter of Frozen Dreams. And the little synopsis I typed up says, blowing the lid off of one of Madison, Wisconsin's most shocking murder cases, a candid account of the Barbara Hoffman case reveals how this massage parlor prostitute manipulated two men and then murdered them for their money. So kind of a fun summer thriller read.
Great. It's a great book.
It's definitely not a PG book.
No, but it's great. I mean, it is. He did a really good job on it, especially researching it. It's really well done.
Yeah.
Harry, have you heard of it?
I have not, no.
Oh, it's pretty it's classic. It's like it's also kind of classic Madison.
Winter
I'm
of
excited.
Frozen Dreams. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll
also
put the name in the chat.
there is a movie. The movie is terrible. Please don't watch it. Just
Don't watch the movie.
Don't watch the movie. It was one of those books that when I read it, like, I felt bad for enjoying it, right? Because it's like, I want to know more and like, tell me all about this. And this is a great book. And like, it's really like, yeah, tell me all about it. But then you kind of stop and think about, she killed a couple of, like, there's two guys that like are not here. Their families mourn them. And, but at the same time, it's a really great read. Our recent Governor Doyle was the district attorney at the time, and so Governor Doyle has some key roles, and some Madison businesses are highlighted, and I'm excited to read it. I'm also a little bit nervous because I have feelings about my good friend Carl and his passing, but we're gonna go with it, and it'll definitely be a not running strictly related book. It was written by a man who ran and who owned a running store, but I don't think anyone runs even once in the book, so it'll be kind of a good change.
Okay.
I did
Good
want
call.
to plug in for Mystery to Me books on Monroe Street, and then A Room of One's Own books off of State Street. They're both doing like phone orders and curbside pickup right now. So if it's within your ability to order it from one of them, they said if you give them a call, they should be able to get it if you're kind of looking for a way to to fund a small business. And also the Madison Public Libraries are doing curbside pickup, and they do have several copies of it, so you could request it through them as well. So
Yeah,
I was
great.
surprised to see Mystery to Me boarded up the other day when I was at Trader Joe's.
yeah, I live kind of by Monroe Street, and I was surprised by the number of businesses that had boarded up, because I mean, Movin Shoes has been the closest issue, I guess, that we've heard of. But
Yeah, I had heard that the partner or wife of the owner of Mystery to Me used to be the police
She was the
chief. Is that right?
police. The
Oh.
chief of
So-
police for the UW.
Okay,
Sue,
so they might
Sue
have felt
Risling.
that they would be targeted.
Yeah, Sue Risling was the
Sue Risling. Okay.
UW Madison chief of police. Yeah, that,
Mhm.
yeah. So you're right. So yeah, she might have prevailed upon her partner to say we should probably do this.
Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for an unusual event in my life. So
Well, thank you.
it was nice to break a routine.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
take care, everyone.
Thanks. You too.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.